Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the third series of talks at Pani Pe Charcha Clean Water Talks. Today's topic is techniques and methods of community mobilization, and we will hear Ms. Samantha Tamma from Nandi Community Water Services to share her experiences on this. These talks, Pani Pe Charcha, are conducted under the USAID supported program SEVA, Sustainable Enterprises for Water and Health. The objective of this program is to share knowledge, promote case studies, and best practices so that decentralized water systems can be scaled. SEVA movement is making innovation and basic service provisions for delivery of safe and affordable drinking water to the last mile. I am your host, Poonam Sevak, Vice President, Programs and Partnerships from Safe Water Network. Safe Water Network catalyzes affordable safe water delivery for poor, working on three pillars: direct field implementation, policy and advisory, and alliance building with networking. With me is Mr. Anand Rudra, Senior WASH Specialist from USAID. Mr. Anand has 30 years of experience in WASH and health. He supports cross-cutting urban development initiatives to USAID South Asia missions. Over to you, Mr. Anand.
Thank you, Poonamji, and welcome to the guest speakers for the day today. USAID is a WASH partner to the Government of India. We have a bilateral arrangement with the Government of India in the space of water and sanitation. We are working pan-India. Globally, we are one of the 80 plus missions that basically are part of the US government's outreach programs in development sector. We have a global water act. We have a global high priority water plan for India. And I think one of the very key components is about people from the community who are part of any engagement to basically contribute and make the programs that we support a reality. So that's why I look forward very eagerly to hear what Nandi would be sharing with us. And welcome once again, Samantha and Poonamji. It's great to see the series live. This is the third of the series that we're looking today. And I'm sure everybody who is part of this session and being logged in from various parts in the country and beyond will benefit from the rich discussion that will happen today. Best of luck, best wishes.
Thank you, Anandji. Speaking briefly about our speakers, Samantha Tamma. Samantha is a manager marketing at Nandi Community Water Services. She holds a postgraduate diploma in rural management from IRMA, that is Institute of Rural Management Anand at Gujarat. She has been working with Nandi Community Water Services for the past 6 years, and prior to this, she has worked in various NGOs like Tribal Welfare Department, People with Disability, and the National Manrega Program. Nandi is a very established NGO and one of the pioneers who brought the community water systems into this space where poor can get affordable drinking water. They were established in 2010 and have more than 1,000 water stations or water centers, as they call it, in 7 states of India, of which 400 centers have been handed to the community. They were the pioneers who developed the public-private partnership model for decentralized drinking water kiosks. And today we will hear from them what are the various techniques and methods of community mobilization that they adopt. So I hand it over to Samantha now.
So for us, community mobilization, it's like it's a huge gamut of things. Like in our experience, and when we're trying to understand, we've set up a plant here, but we see that the demand is not as good as anticipated, or it's not functioning well. And every time, we try to do this kind of a cross examination, we come up with different points and different learnings to say, you know what, here the village selection is good, but actually our team trainings maybe were on par, or so there's different things, like people have tried a lot, but they have actually not adopted it that way. So in a snapshot, it's like we earnestly, genuinely believe that at the selection stage itself, the way we are actually talking with the panchayat, the way we are selecting a village, we're choosing the criteria, we're making the pitch, that is a huge thing. Because once the village selection is over, there is a construction process which goes for certain months. And then the whole thing, the energy, the enthusiasm, or the need establishment for the water center needs to be established. So we did put in a block there to say, from the selection process, we're making the need assessment to the KOLs and understanding the village dynamics there. From there, two, we've realized that then there's the whole messaging part of the campaigning part, and therefore we called it the balancing act, to say there was once upon a time when like the village was very concerted and it was coherent, and a few messages to few people could be sufficient. But here, with a lot of urbanization and urban thinking, urban aspirations getting into some of our rural people, it's like we need to balance where we are targeting the institutions of the village and the community, and how we're doing it to the householder, and how are we explaining the category benefit of the need for safe water against the brand, or how are we doing the standard campaigns, or how do we customize some campaigns. So that's like the whole part around the messaging. And then there's this whole thing to be like absolutely integrated in what we believe. There's a lot of focus we do on employee motivation and training them on our brand values, to say we're walking our talk there. And then there's this aspect around retention, because we set up a plant, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of newness, people come try, but then how do we retain it? And then the last things, the very important thing is inclusion, impact, measurement. So these will be some of the blocks which we'll be going through. So in the village selection, like I was saying, first we try and understand like there's a PIR form, primary information report we call it, where we try see what's the market size, what is the need for drinking water there, how do the people there, what's their ability to pay. We genuinely believe by the guidelines to say the expenditure on water must be 4% of their disposable income, and what are the other sources of water already present there. That way we do a thorough understanding of the village. And we actually take water samples from the village, we give it to NABL certified laboratories, and we do a testing report. In the NABL certified testing laboratory, if the water there is not meeting the conditions, depending on that, we say, see boss, this is the water that you're drinking. We've taken the sample right in front of your eyes. There is a problem here, and we have a donor who can help us. And with this intervention, we can make a partnership. So they give us land and water, and we set up the technology, and that's how the introduction happened. We very strictly believe in the principles of FPIC, which is like free, prior, informed consent. And that is the reason, it's not like there has to be no pressure on the panchayat to say they have to take this water technology. So the decision to go is free. It's prior informed. They know that this is what is going to happen. This will be the cost of the water. And we are expecting that there will be certain minimum number of users who are coming and taking it. Otherwise, it's not a sustainable solution. It's neither sustainable for them nor it's sustainable for us. So it's a free, prior, informed consent. We have a very threadbare discussion at that level, and that helps us a lot. And we go and take the opinion of the local PHED, rural water supply person, to say, because these days there are a lot of other government interventions coming up, and if we know, like in 2 years down the line, 1.5 years down the line, there is going to be a pipe water supply project coming up there. There is going to be a Zilla Parishad water center itself coming up there. It's unnecessarily misspent of the developmental grant, and therefore we do cross-check their opinion. We have an MOU with the Panchayat, but nonetheless, in the process of our setting up, it's mandatory that we have a Gram Sabha resolution, because we want the act of setting up the water plant to be as democratic as possible. And therefore, irrespective of the Panchayat, it's mandatorily insisted we have a Gram Sabha resolution. And once we get the form filled, we actually talk to 25-30 people from head office without, direct intervention from the field teams. There will be at least 5 to 6 phone calls going to the villages of the community. And in the spirit of almost like an audit, we ask them, see, this is going to be a costly developmental grant that is coming to your village. We don't want it to be misutilized. So if you have any concerns, you can raise it. This is an opportunity. So sometimes a lot of feedback that we're not directly getting in terms of our forms or something, we get from their phone calls. And so, yeah, this is basically our selection process, and some things which we do actually have a checklist and we mandate before setting up a plant. And we believe this brings in a lot of accountability for the Panchayat, because we believe in the build, operate, transfer model. We set it up for 7 years and then we hand it back to the Panchayat. And therefore, their ownership in making the intervention sustainable, apart from giving the land, water, and electricity, plays a role. Yeah. Like I was explaining in the intro level itself, in the last 5 years, most of the villages which we went, when we asked our people, what are the sweeping changes that you've seen in the village, say over the last 5 to 7 years? The 2 sweeping changes most of them say is the dish TV that has come and the smartphone. So really people, it's massive. In any very badly developed village to, a moderately developed semi-town kind of thing, these 2 have been very consistent. So because, now people have more access to, there's WhatsApp, they're talking to their friends, their relatives, they're seeing these TV pictures on the dish TV and all. The culture of the village is not, it's not so different to say this is urban, this is rural, and the aspirations of people have changed. And therefore, while one set of activation campaigns are around focusing on the institutions of the village, like the Anganwadi, the school, the PHC, and the SHG groups and things like that, we do give equal importance to, doing door-to-doors, or say some WhatsApp messages, or just talking to people that way. It is a mixed thing of targeting community and targeting individual households. So it's like, the WhatsApp and the mobile can be the new people tree under which people are sitting and discussing things that way. The second very important step for us is like, sometimes what happens is our sector is by and large very unorganized. And once somebody sees that there is some amount that can be made in setting up a water center, in most of the plants, like when we have set up, because we're pioneers, we do it. For the second person to come and set it up, it's very easy because somebody has already done the PIR for him. Somebody knows it's a viable business. And there are always 2 far extremes in a village. There's the south end, there's the north end. So it's very easy that there's more competition coming up. There are people who are feeling that there are very China kind of DROs coming up that way. So the sector being unorganized, one of the other major focus activities for us is also trying to explain what is this quality all about. So we genuinely believe educating our stakeholders on the right quality standards to say, like, say for instance, there is the whole NGT order going on and the sector thing going on to say, if you're drinking water with as low TDS as 30 or 50, it's really bad. You are drinking demineralized water. But unfortunately, in some of the studies that we have done around the water qualities of local entrepreneurs, they really give 16, they give an 18. And so it's not easy, but yeah. So the whole aspect around just not telling good quality is good for your health, but telling what that good quality is like a critical bucket for us. And then there's this whole thing around to say, like, there's some activities which are like standardized. We go talk to the schools, the Anganwadis, the PHCs. These are very sure. But are the SHGs in that village really active, or are they dormant? Or are there village sports youth groups there that are much more active compared to, say, the SHG women? You know, these are some nuances that we get from our primary information report, and sometimes they really help, because we just can't have a one size fits all there. So some of these, like, what are the networks that are more active? Or maybe there's an urban farming group there, or there, the KOL is not a one who has political influence, but somebody who manages the cold storage system there or something like that. So some of those things we just get customized from the report. So this is, see, it's like, they say that, right? All like charity begins at home, messaging begins at home. My first customer is like my employee. The first person who genuinely should believe in the mission, in the vision, in the need at the village is our employees. So, and even now, like, even if we're a decade old, I can say from our experience in trainings, it's not easy for the field staff there to get the concept of a social enterprise. It's like, ये NGO है या ये business है. It's difficult. So to actually get it into the minds of our people, from the structure to how it is being implemented, is a huge block. We're working on this, but we internally ourselves also know that there's a lot of scope for improvement here. So, like, if you look at our LinkedIn page or our, FB or Insta or whatever, there's definitely a lot of messages on our brand values. And this is something which has come up from our qual studies. It's not like it has come as bottom up. It's not like we at the management decided these are our values, but from observationally studies or qualitative studies, it's been established that these are the values that from the bottoms up is something we as NCWs or IPRians, we believe in. So directly or indirectly, messaging around our values to say this is what we stand for is part of our, how we can in some subtle ways influence the culture and the values of our employees that way. So then there's this thing around, so we've done some activation. It's a new intervention in the village. A lot of people have come, they've done trials, and it's a lot of KOLs have also said, okay, let's try this. And then there's this thing around retention. So what we've observed is we don't have a standard pattern here when we look at our values that way. It depends on what's happening in the village. For example, we know for a fact that in summers it's going to increase, and in winters we're going to see a dip. Seasonality, it is a seasonal business. No matter how much we say that water is a 24/7, 365 days basic necessity, we do see strong seasonalities there. And almost say 50% of the people who try initially are the ones who stick to us to say 24/7, 365 days, we'll do it. What we've also understood is, like, as a sector also, we have different definitions for retention. So for us, it's the person who every month subscribes our water card. He's the regular user for us. And if he drops the card every month, he becomes like a dropout. And another thing, what we realized when we were trying to do our analysis and see how we're doing retention is even as a field team or even as our focus for activities, a lot of our mental focus actually goes into recruitment or goes into bringing back the dropout user. So suppose we're doing a door-to-door, or suppose we are putting out a poster. It's very common to have a poster to say, you know what, your water is bad, you need to drink safe water. Or we have a poster to say, you've done already a lot of progress, now don't slip off, keep continuing. But what we realized is people, the ones who are actually our users, are the ones who stuck for the retention, are the ones who already love us, who know a lot about us. And sometimes some encouragement or some recognition towards them to say, you know what, you are really important to us. I am not putting all my energies to the person to whom I have gone, knocked doors, told them what is important, but he's still not interested in me. I will still go and see him. Instead of that, if I'm saying you are equally important to us, you are also a very big change maker. And if we start doing some kind of feedback campaigns, we start talking to them, we understand what they liked and why they're continuing, we feel that can really bring a lot of shift in what are the strategies we're trying to plan in the village there. So we thought this could be like one point we'll share about retention. This is the most trickiest thing around inclusion, impact, and measurement. So what we've observed is the rich and poor divide in the urban is a known fact. Everybody knows, like there's a slum in the village and there's a very high town area, there's a posh area. But of late, like in the village also, there's a lot of starkness, or there's a lot of divide being developed in the villages. So what happens is, like Poonam ma'am was saying, that previous session was on distribution. In the same village, there will be some families who come to us and say, you know what, we're ready to pay more, but we want distribution set up at the doorstep. And there will be some families who are coming and telling us, say we've set it up at 4 rupees for 20 liters or 5 rupees. Even that amount is costly. Even that amount we're not able to pay. So, so there's always a catch-22 situation between is my enterprise being sustainable, and has my enterprise really reached the last mile? Like they can be single women families, especially, or they could be, you know, like if we're in a fluorosis village and the people are suffering with fluorosis there, they can't anyway come and take water, and distribution gets costly to them. So am I really going to vulnerable sections like elderly, handicapped people, single women families, the poorest of the poor? Am I able to do that as well as, you know, reach the people who need the water there? And so a lot of our impact measurements and understanding of inclusion at the moment is happening at a qualitative level. We try, or we do in small independent, so there's some donors who ask for third-party assessments and audits. So those happen. For instance, Safe Water Network recently said they commissioned with SGS, REC commissioned us with this, or BDL commissioned us with IPE Hyderabad. Those happen, but internally, we do some of these checks to see where are we with respect to inclusion and impact. One other aspect where we genuinely believe we want everybody to include are the children. So for all schools and Anganwadis in the village, at the time of the MOU and understanding itself, we tell the Panchayat that if they want, they can come to the center and take water. We have no issues. The Gram Panchayat, the institutional head just has to write a letter to us that congratulations on coming to this village. I'm the headmaster of so-and-so school, and we want free water. If they can just give us a letter like that, schools and Anganwadis have access to free water at the water center. So that's one thing we believe, that while we are not able to equalize things for the elderly and the vulnerable, for children, there's always water. And how we also see impact is, like I was explaining in retention, to say who are my continuous users month on month. And so after the end of 7 years, we go back to the Gram Panchayat and say, see, you can run the water center all by yourself, or if you want, you can ask us to. You can renew our contract and we'll run it for 7 more years. The fact that there are at least a lot of villages who come back and say, you know, we're empowered enough, but we want somebody who's professional to run this, and they give us a renewal, is an impact for us, that our service in the last 7 years has been good. And if we have given back the plants, like you said, a bulk of our plants, we've set up 650 and 400 we've given. The number of water centers that are functional after our handover is also a very big indicator of impact for us, because then there's a sustainable revenue generating asset in the hands of a panchayat. They can give water, and they can as well use that money, say, for a road repair or for an electricity light or something like that. So now trying to understand how is it in terms of the CapEx and OpEx. We're not able to directly give figures here, because it's not like we write the same proposal. Depending on the need of the village, the proposal changes. But approximately 8% of the entire CapEx amount that we ask for goes for Community Connect. And that's how we give the budget split. And what goes into Community Connect is a bulk of it, 50% straight away goes to salaries as a community organizer or the person who's doing mobilizing activities there. And then like you've seen in the previous small share cards that we've shared, there's a particular design around which we brand our water center, the premises and the walls and things there. So 20% goes it for painting and the branding activities. There's some inaugural events that we do, like initially giving pamphlets or meeting these institutions, or if we want to make small prizes around quizzes of water, things like that. So 15% goes for inaugural events. 8% is a later stage. We cascade it over some months for activities on field. And 7% goes on a kind of buying an instrument there, whether it's a smartphone, we need to buy tab, or sometimes it's like we need to get these Pico projectors to project the films there out there. Or if we're doing it in Rajasthan, we wanted to do fluoride testing kits, which was like a new thing. Some kind of we do need material to do the Community Connect mobilization. So that 7% goes there. There'll be a 10% here and there depending on the need or the proposal that way, but by and large, this is how our costs are split.
So thank you very much, Samantha, for this great presentation. Now I will open the floor for questions. So Samantha, one of the first questions which I have with me is, how does Nandi measure the consumer behavior change continuum? Because it's a continuous process, as we understood. So how do you measure the consumer behavior change?
So very rudimentary thing that helps us get into it is like our sales numbers. Month on month, because we have a subscription card, in very few cases, we actually give loose water. So the moment we say we only believe in a subscription card, if a card has dropped or if the card has increased or if its card has reached twice, it tells us that he is our user or he is a dropout in that way. So, so the way we approach consumer behavior is like there's a lot of anecdotal information coming from the field to understand this is what has happened in the village this way, that way. But the month-on-month analysis of the number of cards that have been subscribed in that village is the first indicator for us to see something has gone exceptionally well or something is going wrong there. Yeah.
And besides this, do you have any other KPI through which you measure your consumer behavior change and at what frequencies? So this we get that this is one of the KPIs where you are understanding and you are basically jotting down the subscription card refills and dropouts. So this itself is a very big KPI and an indicator. But other than this, do you have any other indicator?
So it depends on portfolio to portfolio. So for example, in AP and Telangana, there's some of our very remote portfolios, and we are not so technology built in those cases. But say in some of our new portfolios like Rajasthan and Sony, we do have a lot of mobile numbers that our users use in the village. So sometimes when say once in a quarter, what we do is we send out direct SMSs or NPS score number forms to the villagers and say, please send your feedback. That is one way of feedback which we get, which is a direct feedback. So the moment we send it, 2 days down the line in the Google form, we know the numbers and it's a direct feedback. Sometimes what happens is the response rate to some of these forms are not so encouraging in some cases. If that's the case, we give our WCAs itself some of these forms on a particular day, on an unannounced day, and we say tomorrow to everybody who's coming to the water plant and taking the water, they just need to send their NPS score. It's not going to take. And, we just keep these as basic as one question possible, because the moment the question is lengthy that way, people don't answer or things like that. So that is one way we do it. Or otherwise, we do have a lot of interns help that's coming from different developmental colleges, and to a lot of our interns, the project will be around calling our customers, trying to take a feedback. So from qualitative to quantitative based NPS scores, apart from this, we do have those feedbacks hitting us to say, because sometimes what happens is it's a delicate thing. Because there is no alternative in the village, they may be taking a water. But if the user is unhappy, the moment there's an alternative, they'll switch. So irrespective of the numbers that are coming, like in villages that are doing good as a sample and villages where we see there's some issue that is going on in the villages, thing like that, we do these kind of checks. Yeah.
The second question is, while we were hearing you, we were hearing more of the strategies that you have adopted for rural marketing.
Yeah.
Nandi has many of its installations in urban spaces also. So we would like to understand, when you moved to the urban space, did you have any other strategy, or was the same strategy for consumer outreach and activation included?
So urban, we've been doing over the last 3 years, and we're not as established in urban as we've been in the rural. So very honestly, we did have our own roadblocks that way. It wasn't easy. Like we did some urban in Jaipur, around Jaipur slums, around that project. And we're doing some in Maharashtra and some in AP. So we mostly adopt the same approach depending on how we're doing the PIF form. But the nature of the KOLs, or it's actually not that easy, because in the rural, despite all we are saying that they're going through an urban culture and all, if I knock a door, nobody takes offense. They open the door and they listen to you. They have that time and they have that patience. In an urban, I can't knock doors because mostly the woman is also working. There's nobody at home, or they don't trust you. So it's not that easy to penetrate the initial information in the urban like in the rural. So in the first 3 weeks, if my message has gone to a lot of people in the rural, in the urban, it takes time. It takes at least 2 to 3 months, because accessibility to my users is a bit low. So then, we were like, maybe we have to depend more on technology. Like, maybe we'll make the WhatsApp groups, things like that. Or, like there's a normal KOL and there's a digital KOL. There's somebody who's more accessible on platforms and things like that. So there are some of these kind of, or for example, a lot of people go to government schools in the rural. The private school is a minority. A lot of people go to government schools. I'm talking to the government school teacher, and therefore I have a lot of penetration. And I'm also giving them water there. So the doors are open easier. Whereas in rural, a lot of them are into private schools. And the private schools, cracking a private school management door for a session on safe water isn't that easy. So while the principles remain the same, like negotiating a lot at the establishment stage, believing in free, prior, informed consent, telling them this is happening, the way we're mobilizing in urban changes a little bit depending on how it's being, what's the information we're getting there.
We do understand the challenges of urban marketing.
Yeah.
And we also understand that you have to largely rely on digital marketing, advertisement, and making a noise to that effect. So thank you very much for that. I have a question from Dr. Hemant, and Dr. Hemant would like you to answer. To set a water station, what type of approvals are you taking from statutory authorities? And what is the time required to get these approvals?
So what type of approvals we take is we go and talk to the panchayat, and we tell them that this has been your main source for drinking water, which at least 60% of the people are drinking. And since that is contaminated, they need to give us a space of land, water, and electricity. And most of this they go and take it with the electricity board, but most of this is within the purview of the panchayat, and we do it as per the Gram Sabha resolution also. Now, in case this plant where we are trying to set up falls under the black zone or the dark zone, where there is groundwater authorities, where the district collector himself mandated that the GP has to do it. See, technically it falls under the GP's radar to do it, but sometimes they may be so aware, they may not be so aware. So if that is the case, what is the zone in which the groundwater bucket it is following under is something we only check, and we tell the panchayat upfront that this is the situation there. But most of our approvals are at the Gram Panchayat itself. The time is a very tricky question. None of us can be sure, because there's a lot of dialogue that happens within the panchayat, and we insist on a Gram Sabha resolution. So say, for example, in places like Jaipur and other villages, the Gram Sabha will meet only twice in a month. You can't, every state has its own way of calling for a Gram Sabha. So in some states, like I think AP, Telangana, the panchayat can call a Gram Sabha as and when needed. They just need to put it on a blackboard and say, for this particular reason, we are calling for a Gram Sabha, you need to come with a quorum. And then the Gram Sabha can be done. In other states, Gram Sabha needs to happen only on mandated days, like a Tuesday or a Thursday. And that time we wait. So time is never in our hands.
And finally,
securing,
what is the payback period of the project?
Payback period, it depends on the number of users we're able to mobilize. So and most of the times we look for payback only for at state level sustainability. A lot of our HO costs, head office costs, we are not at the moment very consciously monitoring to say, are we able to get back that? So we are not looking at payback for capex, and we are not looking at payback for a lot of our head office costs. Barring these two, if everything is going well, say in 3.5 to 4 years is something we'll get back our payback. We'll get our payback. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. There's a question from Dr. TNVV Rao. He would like to know what is the average water recovery from the water station, and if there are taste issues, how are they handled?
So average water recovery, to say what is the percentage of reject water?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So this purely depends on the TDS level in the groundwater. So if the TDS is really high, as like in Haryana and some of these places, we have 1000 TDS, 800 TDS, then the recovery is, I think, almost 60% goes in waste, and 40 is what we keep using into the safe water space. But suppose we are in other places where we are not using an RO technology. We are using only a UV or a UF, because there's only one particular problem, like a salinity or a nitrate or fluoride. There, water wastage is very less. These are very groundwater friendly technologies, and there we can say up to 80% water is something we're using for after only there's only 10 to 20% wastage. So that depends on the raw water TDS and the technology that we've deployed. But yeah, on average, it's 40% or something like that, if we're looking at everything put together that way. And the next question was?
No, okay. You have answered about the taste.
Yeah, so taste is a very tricky thing again. So what we see is, as long as we are the only water center in the village, and we have proved through, say, NABL certified laboratories that the taste of the quality of the raw water is bad, we don't get so many questions on taste. But once there's a local entrepreneur in the village and he is giving water as low as 18 TDS, 30 TDS, and we are trying to maintain the appropriate ratio of 80 to 130, there are definitely questions on taste that are coming up. And it's difficult. There are times when we have yielded to it because it's very difficult. People don't, no matter how much logically we try and explain that the taste is good, people will go back for taste. So there are instances when we reduce it to bring it to 60 or 70 that way. And then otherwise, there are times when we explain to say we're not going to do it any further below, and it's not good for your health. And over the last 3 years, I think these NGT guidelines that have come around desalinated water, these things are helping us. We're proactively going and talking to our panchayats to say, see, we've been telling this all the while, and now even the government is saying it. So, yeah.
So thank you so much, Samantha. Now I will ask Mr. Anand Rudra to add a few words as we wind up the session. Over to you, Anand.
Yeah, thank you so much, Poonamji. And I think it was a very invigorating and interesting talk that we heard from Samantha ji. Samantha ji, thank you so much for participating in our Seva series of water champions. And I think today's talk gave a lot of insights. We learned a lot from each other. Everybody knows that things are not one size fit all, as you have already mentioned it very nicely. We are all in the same sector, mind you. We basically understand what is it that basically gives us each an edge. And I think it's very, very, very nice and very, very, very dignified that we keep that opportunity to share our good and the bad and the ugly with everybody. Because I think the main objective of each other to share this is to basically make sure that we know a little bit more than what we thought we knew. So thank you once again, Poonamji, for putting this series together. We look forward this to continue. Samantha ji, once again, thank you so much for participating in today's talk show. It's been a great enlightenment for learning more from what you presented. And we look forward to basically having people adopt and understand how this is moving forward in their own life experiences. Thank you once again, everybody.
Thank you very much, Samantha. Thank you very much, all the participants. And many thanks to you, Mr. Anand, for enabling these talk and series.